Hello and welcome to Shape the System, where we find and tell the stories that help people to rethink the way the world works. We interview people from all over the world who are helping to change our systems for the better. Shape the System is an independent podcast with support from KPMG High Growth Ventures, who help ambitious founders and their teams scale up for success. More about KPMG High Growth Ventures after the interview. We hope you enjoy this episode.
Make the bullshit entertaining.
I'm so glad to hit the record button just before that, because that's actually going to be the intro to this whole thing. I'm not even going to edit it out. I love it. Hopefully that's all right for you, Howard. It's going to be a pearl of an interview, and that's going to be my last Pearl joke. But Howard Pearl, thank you so much for joining the show. We're going to be talking about charity today, the business of charity and the operations of charity and how these work and how they don't work. And Howard, before we just dive into the problem statement like we always do, welcome to the show. Firstly, just give us a little bit of context of where you're coming from, where you are, and then we can dive straight in.
Thank you very much for having me. From our sort of pre-conversation, I am enthusiastically looking forward to the next, 40 to 60 minutes and where it may lead. My name is Howard Pearl. I'm the chief executive of an organization colloquially known as CARS, which is an acronym for Charitable, Adult Rides and Services, Inc. We are basically a nonprofit that's owned by a nonprofit that's 107 years old, and we only do business with nonprofits, at least from the service that we provide. We are, I think, best known for our vehicle donation program. We are the largest vehicle and real estate donation program in the U.S. that you have never heard of. We're not the guys with the obnoxious jingle. Let me make that very clear. And many
the waving
people
guys with the waving hand.
Yeah, yes, that's not us. We have just a little over 9,000 clients now across the U.S., and they include many of the brands that you would recognize: American Red Cross, American Kidney Foundation, Sierra Club, the Sierra Club, and so on. And we cover really thousands of categories of nonprofits. We whether we're sending them $5 million a year or $5,000 a year, they get the same treatment. We provide 100% of the marketing materials that are required that we produce in-house, video, radio, for broadcast, mostly because we service hundreds and hundreds of NPR and PBS public media partners here in the U.S. as well. So if you're an NPR listener across the U.S., you'll hear them asking for vehicles. That's us. So you don't know who we are because we're B2B. Our job is not to promote our business. Our job is to promote your business. We want people donating to you, to whoever you are as a nonprofit. We'll service it underneath, and we turn 80 cents on the dollar back to you where the money belongs.
Okay. So I want to get to CARS and how it operates a bit later on, but I want to kind of come back a step, because the nature of charity and charitable organizations is something that's actually fascinated me for a while. And I come at it probably with not a lot of knowledge, actually with not a lot of knowledge. But I'm curious, and this is going to be hard to be a one answer fits all, because you talked about the Kidney Foundation all the way down to an animal shelter in Cincinnati or, wherever they are. But if you can, and maybe you have to answer it slightly differently depending on the nature, I kind of want to understand how charities kind of set up, how they operate, why they get started, who runs them, how they're funded. Just unpack the status quo of the charitable organization landscape for us.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, there is only, we have 9,000 clients. There's 9,000 answers. Why does a nonprofit get started? Well, because, you have two people, one that has an altruistic nature and one that has a need and is incapable of fulfilling the need for themselves. And so it starts that way. I mean, if we look close to home, even just during COVID, right? Think of the thousands of people that ended up delivering meals to people they never even knew because there was a need to fulfill. And then there was another half of the people that had a need to be needed. And so the philanthropic and the actual nonprofit side, in the calculus, you have to consider both sides of the equation. There are people that need to be doing things for people. And nonprofits provide an organized, structured, funded process in order to do that, whether you're a donor and you're expressing your appreciation and your gratitude for the things you've succeeded at in life, or whether you're a volunteer and you just need something more to do to contribute to your community, and that platform is provided by the nonprofit. And on the other side, you've got a world that's spinning out of control in many places, right? We need the public to continue to donate their capital in order to fund research. If it's children's research, children's cancer research, look at St. Jude. We provide them, millions of dollars a year in donations. And what are they doing? They're curing childhood cancer. They're up to 92%, cure on these blastomas, which is amazing. So they need the capital, they need the help, they need the volunteers. You're talking kidney, it's the same thing. Usually the money's going into research. Now, if you're talking about prevention of cruelty to animals, or feed the whales, or protect the carrot tops, whatever your cause is, there's somebody out there that says, that's me. And trust me, the nonprofits we see vary by every subject matter you can think of. They're out there. And
is that a good thing, by the way? So, is it good that we have that spread, or does that actually make sense? It's kind of where we are. But...
Well, I think it's good. I mean, socially, I think from a social perspective, it's good. You know why? Because it provides an outlet for giving and an outlet for, solving a problem that isn't sort of determined by somebody else. It isn't determined by the government. It isn't determined by our parents. It isn't determined by our community. It's determined by a need that arises, and some altruistic human being, some social need in an individual to, in some way, help, and it resonates with them. They may say, that almost happened to me one day. If I was in that position, I would appreciate or need the help. No, I think that, the bigger guys have become very organized. I think, large scale nonprofits, like American Red Cross, or again, St. Jude, a billion, 1.5 billion in donations annually a year. But look what they're doing. Look what they're doing. You may not have a child that'll ever be touched by childhood cancer, but if you did, isn't it wonderful to know that there's an organization out there that people are supporting to do it? And again, maybe, in your own community, there's a specific need. Catholic Charities, there's hundreds of little, groups around the country that run Catholic Charities out of their church basements that, help with the homeless, help with, hunger. Hunger is a big issue. For heaven's sake, we work with a lot of food banks. If there weren't food banks, they're probably 12, 15% of the people in this country wouldn't eat. Mm-hmm. They would.
Yeah. And so segueing from that to kind of the way capital works in the allocation, or the sourcing of capital works in kind of charitable organizations or nonprofits generally, traditionally and typically, where are they getting capital from? How are they going about that? Is that effective or not? What does that landscape look like for, let's say, someone who's not part of the CARS Association, because we'll talk about the CARS aspect a bit later on?
Well, look, there are, again, nonprofits for everything. One of the organizations that, that we work with, we support, they're called mainly Mozart, so they are, committed to the continuation of the proliferation of classical music. And what do they do with their money? Well, for one, they support a 350-piece youth orchestra. Kids as little as 7 or 8, learning to play a classical violin, because they don't do it in a lot of schools anymore. So we've removed, that from the school. And I think that there's a tremendous benefit, both socially and intellectually, not just, keeping the kids off the street, but stimulating their, their wonderful little minds with the complexities of this. But in addition to that, in the summertime, they have a large orchestra that employs all the sort of many of the leaders in the municipal orchestras or philharmonics around the country. So they end up putting together what has often been described as the finest, concert or philharmonic orchestra in the world while it's banded together. But it's a temporary thing, only summer. So what does it do? One, it provides great entertainment in the communities that it exists. It provides a social outlet for kids, to perform and learn the values of and the intricacies of music. But in addition to that, it provides an opportunity to continue to afford, to pay these musicians so they can afford to be full-time musicians and provide, some people, see the value in having a municipal philharmonic. Some people think it's, culturally nice, but we should be using the money to feed people. So don't give to only Mozart, give to a bread bank.
It's interesting that there's almost a free market type dynamic that happens in all of this. If you've got 9,000, then people will vote with their feet.
Yeah,
what's the reality of that for a charity then? Yeah. Sorry. Good.
Well, like even, for us, I don't know, are you familiar with Kelley Blue Book?
No, not specific. Oh, the thing that tells you the value of a car.
Yeah, that thing. Yeah, so you can go to Kelley Blue Book, for example, and if you don't like the value of the car, you can slide over to the donate button, and that'll bring you right to our site, and you can choose from any one of these 9,000 things that you think are important to you. You can find it by city, by category, by anything. It doesn't matter. You can find something that impacts you, whether it's in your home or far away.
Just want to get back to something that you mentioned actually before we got on the show. And I haven't heard this word before, but you brought it up also while we've been talking. So I want to understand a bit more about this idea of undesignated and why that's such a powerful idea for a charity and for charitable impact generally.
Well, the law requires nonprofits, at least in this country, are pretty heavily regulated. Basically, nonprofits, we're public companies, right? We're owned by the community. So we have to file these long forms called 990s, which is basically the same thing that any public company reports their income to and their revenue. Now, the thing is this. If I am a donor and I say I'm giving $100,000, to build an extension on a building, I expect to come back in 12 months' time and see that my money's been used to build that building, because that's what I designated it for. If I could find that you spent my $100,000 on computers, I'm violated. I'm not happy. So when you donate money that's designated to something specific, build a library, hire help, get new linen for your dormitory, only use the youth orchestra, not for the adult orchestra, because I'm interested in seeing cultural development in children, then that's what you have to use the money for. But also when people give cash, or donate their vehicles or donate property or whatever, generally it's considered undesignated funding, which means as a nonprofit, if somebody donates, $100,000 to me and it's undesignated, I can use it for staff development to send people out for education, or I can buy new computers, or I can use it to develop a marketing plan to go out and raise more money. If it's undesignated, it's just money I can spend on anything that I legitimately need. You can't take the money home in your lunch bag, for heaven's sakes. It's given to the nonprofit for the use of the proliferation of the nonprofit. And in the nonprofit arena, if you don't understand that the donor is sacrosanct, the donor and the donor's wishes are without a doubt the single most important part of the equation. We've gotten into, disagreements or disputes on how things are done with our partners on occasion. And, at the end of the day, we will always take the donor's side of the equation, even over we're a long-standing partner. There are times when we've decided it was more important to make the donor whole because, we didn't like the way things were or the way things weren't. So our job, is to make sure that the people we work with are, stand-up people, that they are legitimate, not only properly certified as a nonprofit, but that their values and align with those of the community. On the other hand, we don't judge. We may serve two sides of a coin. We may serve those who believe you should have the right to own a gun, and those that think all guns should be banned. Those that think you should have the right to choose, and those that think that abortion is completely abhorrent. We take a political stand, and personally, it's none of my business what people want to, or why they want to donate to a particular organization. That's not. what is important that I facilitate that donation, that the maximum amount of money gets from the guy who's given it, or the woman who's given it, or the family that's given it, or the institution that's giving it, gets to the institution that they're giving it to, and that it gets used for that purpose.
I want to understand something a little bit more about this undesignated, designated, because my thesis is that, and a lot of companies have kind of, that are impact-led, but like for-profit companies, have kind of tried to play this bat of, if you knew where your money was going, then you would be more connected to the brand or the values. You kind of think about the sponsor a child, right, where they don't just say, give us $1 a day to help world hunger. They say, this is the kid you're actually helping, and you get the photo and the kid writes a letter, and they're creating a direct connection. And my guess is that when something gets designated, someone says, oh, I got to see the impact of my money because that library got built. But I'm wondering if that contrasts with ultimately the capital is probably more efficiently spent if you just give it to them. And if they're aligned to their mission, they will use it to further the mission to the best of their abilities, which may be better than you saying a library would be good. I'm trying to understand the contrast between impact and designation.
I think you find that it's the larger donors that usually designate their funds. If you're given $100 a month, it's going into the general fund that's going to be for the general welfare of whatever where the cause is. But if you're writing a check, for $100,000 or, $3 million over 2 years, or, $100 million over 4 years, if you're Microsoft or whatever, then generally it's designated for a specific project. In those cases, the nonprofit will go to somebody that's predisposed or that has a pool of funds. The Amazon, the wife of the Amazon, who has
Mackenzie's
large pool of capital. Sorry, I forgot her name.
Yeah, Mackenzie, I think.
Hopefully, it's not age-related memory issues, but work-related. But she has a fund, and you can take your nonprofit and make an application, for specifically what it is you want to do with the capital. And a lot of their work, a lot of what she's doing is going to small and medium-sized nonprofits that don't generally have access to grants, and doing a good job of covering a flora of different sort of verticals that require the funding. So, but when people are asking for small gifts, on the TV, give today, so animal cruelty is wiped out, that sort of thing. Generally, all that money goes into, the general fund, unless people specifically.
I'm very finicky about it. It's kind of interesting because I think I'm going to make an unusual parallel here, but when you go out and you try to sell software, enterprise software, they have this idea of, it's selling lots of little things to rabbits, or are you doing elephants? You're going to get one, it takes you 2 years to get it, but once you get one, you're kind of set. And the kind of common refrain is you kind of want to be hunting for gazelles or deer. Like, you want this thing that's big, and you get a sizable chunk and you can do a lot with it, but it's not going to take you 2 years to get. And when you just talk then about piecemeal or small or recurring small donations or large $1 million grants, and there's this bit in between where you're like, what if you were giving 2 or 5 or 10 and you were getting that? It might be a very efficient and effective pace to play. It kind of segues nicely to where cars and real estate as a source of funding fit in. I kind of want to understand how this works. Like, I've got a car and I'm sick of it and I just want to give it to someone. What am I donating? Why does that contribute to capital? Help unpack the whole cars model for us.
Well, it's like, it's not unlike people giving small amounts of cash. Generally, when you donate a vehicle, and by the way, in a good year, we'll process 155,000 vehicles. So it's not a small business or industry, and we're not the only people out here doing this. So when people donate vehicles, for example, generally it's because there are 3 parts of the equation. When I sort of first arrived here, I always thought it was, well, people want the tax credit, right? They're going after the tax credit. But at the end of the day, we've done research after research after research after research, and it keeps coming back the same thing. The biggest reason people give cars, Vincent, what do you think the biggest reason people give cars for?
I'm hopefully right, but I don't think I will be. I can't be bothered selling it.
Of course. One, they have a need to get rid of it.
Yeah, I don't want it anymore. Get it out of my life.
This thing is clogging up my driveway. The kid doesn't live here when he left this piece of crap for me to deal with, right? Or unfortunately, pardon me, I've had a parent, that passed away, and mom's a survivor, and she says, look, Dad's car has been sitting in the garage now for 2 years. I'm cleaning out the cupboard. It's time for the car to go, right? You might as well, and I'm not going to sell it. I don't want strangers coming to my house. And since they booked the guy that tried to sell his half-ton truck in the parking lot at the grocery store, people aren't going to the shopping center lots to meet strangers to sell their cars anymore. So, and if you're not getting a decent price on it from the car dealer, then you might as well take the opportunity to be a little altruistic and give it to something that you care about, because it's worth an awful lot more to who you're donating it to than just selling it for $500 or $1,000 or whatever. Trust me, I can dismantle that vehicle and get 3 times the number you're going to get from it.
Mm. Well, what's the number one reason, though?
But even better still, environmentally, right? I can refurbish and sell that vehicle to somebody that doesn't have a lot of money, that needs a vehicle, and the vehicle's got 100,000 miles left on it, and some low-income individual can get what is like a brand new shiny car to them, and get their kids to school and get to work, particularly in the larger states where you need a vehicle in order to even get to work.
Yeah. But what was the number one reason? I got the number 2 reason.
Well, the number one reason I got to get rid of it. The number 2 reason is I want to do something nice for this organization, and number 3 is I get some tax credit.
Right. Okay, so I was right. I just wanted it out of my life. This is the number one reason.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
The reason why I'm laughing a little bit about this is I had one of these cars. Now, I had my first car that I bought was a 1970 Holden Ute, and I bought it for $750, and I drove it as an 18-year-old kid, and then eventually I moved state, and it sat in the driveway, and Mum didn't want it anymore, and I gave it away. I didn't like it. Was pointless trying to sell it. It ran. It was a cool car. It's probably worth about $10,000 now because it was a vintage car, essentially, what it is now. But like this idea that at some point, ironically and weirdly, we see a car as a disposable asset, just like really fascinating. I want to come back to a few of the pieces of the puzzle you just said, because simply giving a car to someone isn't where the value creation happens. To your point, you can either value add to a perfectly fine car and actually offload it for more than what it was donated for, essentially, and then that benefit is actually what goes to the charity, or pull it apart. Help me understand practically how that works. What is it that you guys run a field of people who are doing this? How do you actually provide that?
We have agreements with well over 300 auctions across the country, some of which we own. So, you will call, just like you did with your pals in Australia. I probably can tell you who picked it up, actually, because, you donate it to, XYZ nonprofit. Okay, they will, you're actually not talking to them. You're actually talking to a subcontractor, somebody like us, who would assign it to a local auction yard, who would assign it to a tower, who would go out to your home, pick the vehicle up, get the paperwork, the ownership title paperwork and so on, leave a receipt, bring the car to the auction. The auction will, give it a bath and clean it up a little bit if it needs a new battery, it's just easy bolt-on stuff. And then, within 2 weeks, it would, go into an online auction. And, there are 2 categories of auctions, sell to the public, or, in wholesale auctions, they sell to these, the smaller car dealers, that you see on the side of the road. They maybe got 30 cars there and, buy here, finance here, that sort of stuff, right? Where they don't need an awful lot of money on the vehicle. They need to make the money on the financing. So they sell these vehicles and they provide warranties. And in many cases, I've seen these guys when the cars break down, if they break down, rather than replace your engine, it's cheaper for them just to give you a new car. Not a new car, but another. It's less expensive than buying a new motor for the one. So they do provide a valuable service to people, that have economic challenges. So that's how those things are disposed of. So supposing you donated your car and we took it to the auction and it got it got $1,200. So here's how it would work. $200 for the tow, we would pay the $200, right? And there's $1,000 left after the expenses. And all we ever take out of there are the tow fees and the admin fees, which are very small. We'll say that adds up to $200. So there's $1,200 to divide between you and us. You get $800, no load, all yours. We get 200. Of the 200, I have to run my business. And don't forget, I'm a nonprofit, which means I have a large social service agency, to support with a budget, of $140 million. We've prepared and delivered through that agency 5 million meals since the beginning of COVID. We feed people, we house people, we advocate for those who are not able to advocate for themselves. So I'm a nonprofit as well. My surplus goes to support that nonprofit. And so I operate two businesses. One is the business, and the other is, supporting the nonprofit that we operate.
Well, I was going to ask this because I was trying to work out how those two things were connected, and ironically, given what CARS actually does, one feeds the other, right? So you have this network of 9,000 charities who make donations. You provide all that infrastructure, which feeds the ability for you to then go and actually run a charity yourself, which is genius and ingenious.
We make our money to run our nonprofit by providing money to other nonprofits. That is correct. It is unique, and it's
so cool.
It's very well. We're not the only one. There are a lot of large nonprofits in this country. You take Shriners, for example. You're living in the U.S. now?
Yeah, I mean, back in Australia now, but yeah, we lived there for 5 years.
Okay, well, awesome. What do I remember having worked for an Aussie once? We're going to walk the turkey back.
Swearing, probably.
walk, and the flies, right? But
flies and walkabouts and Fosters probably, although that's not true, by the way. We don't drink Fosters. You do, we don't.
I don't drink Fosters.
Well, us Americans do. We sell it to you guys, but none of us drink it.
Yeah, humans are funny. So I don't remember where I was going with this conversation.
You're going to talk about Shriners, this group that also has a model. I'm interested in this idea that
Shriners has. If you eat lettuce in this country or mushrooms, chances are you are supporting Shriners. They own some of the largest lettuce production farms in the country.
Mm-hmm.
So we're not we're not the only nonprofit that has a business that supports their nonprofit.
No, I think the business supporting the nonprofit, absolutely, I get. But I think the idea that you've said there is a way of raising capital that will enable a charity to operate, and as opposed to you going out and setting up that network of 9,000, places to do it, to funnel all it back, you've said, what if we actually lifted charities generally, which is part of our social good, and then also pulled enough for the specific thing that I care about, which is the welfare of people over 65 who can't drive anymore, and that's linked to our mission. Like, it's just an interesting infrastructure play. It was the whole reason I really wanted to do this interview with us. Like, it's just fascinating, the idea that a non-profit would think we have to build capability to raise capital, and why wouldn't we make that available to other non-profits is a wonderful meta. You talk about CARS, we use that example. Before we came on the show, you talked about real estate. Like, help me understand some of the asset classes today that you're focused on, and what asset classes you're thinking about in the future as well.
I'm going to do that, but I'm going to do that in 1 second. Sure. I'm just going to back to my handy dandy little fridge there. You'll forgive me. So much talking. Just need to get a little something to drink. Thanks very much.
Absolutely.
That's the beauty of a podcast, right? You can just kind of sit here and be yourself, tell the story.
Absolutely.
So, well,
have a drink. Take a second.
Thanks. So we were chatting about the asset classes.
Yeah, with cars, I can definitely see. I've got a car. I just want it out of my life. It doesn't make sense to try to sell it. I'm going to get a few $100, and it's all the hassle. People in my home, and then I have to be responsible for it, and it's a whole bunch of costs. So I can understand cars as an asset class. Before we got on the call, you had said that real estate is another asset class that has some of those similar kind of, things that go with it. But there's also potentially other asset classes. So I'm interested in, let's talk a bit more about real estate, maybe the other ones that are already happening and the ones you're thinking about.
Well, real estate we can talk about briefly. Believe it or not, it's a great asset class to give for a number of reasons. One, the tax implications are really huge, because in the U.S., and I'm pretty sure it's the same in Australia, our tax regs are very similar, frankly, and uniquely, that if you donate a piece of property to a legitimate 501c3 and you have an appropriate valuation on the property, you get the tax credit for the assessed value of the property. Now, let me explain 3 or 4 different scenarios that make sense. You're a young married guy, and you and your wife just had your first child, and you decide you need you're going to buy a small plot of land somewhere out in out in Wagga Wagga to have your little summer home. All right. And so you buy your little plot of land and you build your little cottage. And then you have another child and another child. And so you add on to this little cottage, and then it's winterized. And then the municipality that, you were 30 miles from all of a sudden starts encroaching. Now it's part of a municipality. And all of a sudden this piece of property you bought, 40 years ago or 30 years ago that were for $36,000 is now worth, $1,200,000 because of where it is. And maybe because of the development. And you look around and you say, oh my God, I've got 4 kids. One is, one has moved to, Cincinnati, I think you said. One has moved to Pittsburgh. One is still living at home and just had another child. And she's expecting you to give her the home. So, whatever. So you look around and you say, I don't need this headache. If I leave this to my kids in my estate, they're just going to rip each other apart, trying to decide who gets what. I am going to donate this to the Church of St. Francis Assisi, because when I fell down and skinned my knee, they were there with medicine to help me. Whatever your reason is, and so you donate the property, and we take it and we sell it, and let's assume we get we sell it quickly, because that's the idea, is liquidate these assets quickly. And let's assume I get $800,000 for the property and I sell it within a couple of weeks. So now we got $800,000. You have the tax credit for $1.2 million, because that's what it was properly assessed at. The $800,000, you say, I want $200,000 of that. And we say, well, okay. We give you the $200,000, and you pay regular income tax on that, but you still have your full tax credit, but you have to pay the full income tax on the $800,000. So now what happens? I casually asked the guy, what do you want? What are you going to do with $200,000? I'm just curious. He says, well, I'm going to give $25,000 each to each of my 4 kids, so they realize something from that property, so they can't, whine and complain forever. And, it's my decision. And so they get a little bit of cash, and that shuts them up and sends them away. And they're not going to beat each other's throats, right? Contentious little creatures that they are, as much as I love them. And the other 100, what are you doing with that? Well, it's been a good life. I'm taking my wife on a 9-month cruise around the world. We're going to move into a condo on a ship. It's going to cost us $100,000. That's what we're going to do. And the rest of it goes to the nonprofit of your choice that can use that money to do whatever is important to you. Now, if you're in the U.S., and I gather it's probably the same there, when you reach a certain age, if you've got tax-protected income, in the U.S. we call them IRAs or RRSP.
Superannuation here, but yeah.
Or 401, whatever your tax-protected savings are, your pension money, with this huge tax credit, you're not going to pay, you pay very little tax as you liquidate that stuff. So it's a hit against the value of your capital. So there's real reason to do it. Now, if you're a commercial guy and you got 5 small strip bars, strip malls, Freudian there, I'm in the automotive business, that's one of
it's where the deals get done, I'm sure.
Not in about 30 years, but I've always been automotive and in the younger years. But anyway, look, oh God, you have to sort of look at what's the guy's business doing, right? He's got these strip malls. 4 of them are doing really well. 1 of them isn't. So he's got this tax liability from the profitability of this one, and he's got overhead, carrying this one dog that isn't working real well. So he donates the dog, right? He gets rid of the property, we sell it, turn it into a tax credit for him, and so he ends up sort of, neutral, but he loses the one that's costing the money. So he ends up ahead, and some some nonprofit is going to get the benefit of whatever we sell that piece of property for. Not selling a working mall, but we're selling a piece of land. And sometimes we have to really work at it. We had a small piece of property, commercial property donated in Alabama. We ended up selling it to the neighbor because it was an obscure piece of property in a weird place and so on and so on. So eventually we got on the phone and called the neighbor and said, look, this piece of property is for sale. This is what it's going for. This isn't going to come up very often. It's a great opportunity for you. And they agreed and they bought it for a reasonable price. So it doesn't matter, whatever the property is, you can deal with it. We don't take timeshares, but everything, just about everything.
Yeah. Is there, so like there's some practicalities to it. There's clearly some tax advantages in doing it. And this is part of why people go, I can make the numbers work for whatever reason. Does it have a similar set of...
Right? That's the difference with real. It's usually done, usually a huge tax component as opposed to a vehicle.
Yeah. And then it has the same kind of practical but different challenges for you as an organisation, which is we have to sell this thing, we have to get it ready for sale. There's costs involved in doing that. There's our agent fees probably rather than toller fees, but the same type of economics is sort of playing out ultimately.
Yeah, and most nonprofits don't want to take real estate unless it's worth 7 figures, which is why we do. Because when we acquire property on your behalf, you have no liability. You don't have to insure it. You don't have to pay the property tax on it. You don't need to maintain it. You don't have to be worried if some kid's going to crawl over the fence, fall down, break his leg, and sue you. All of that goes away. We manage the entire process and making it easy for nonprofits to have a real estate donation program that normally they would not be able to manage.
Yeah, it's a fascinating idea. I mean, the thing I think about as well is these organisations probably don't want cars either, but they do like the idea that capital can be realised and turned into this undesignated source of funding for the nonprofit itself. So getting beyond kind of cars and real estate, one of the things I wanted to ask about this, and this is when you talked about kind of cars as an asset and real estate as an asset, there's obviously been this kind of promise and trend towards the idea that as individuals, generationally, we're moving towards the use of assets rather than the ownership of assets. How that mega trend is happening, albeit slowing down a little bit from what I understand. How does that factor into how you're thinking about where these assets are coming from? Is that a Howard Mark II problem? You don't have to think about that. That might not be in your time horizon.
No, it's very much. Well, I guess it depends on what kind of a chief executive you want to be. My vision is when I leave, I would like to leave not only a properly functioning business, but one that has a runway already laid out. And if the individual that takes over, for me at some point, even though I plan to live forever, should that not happen, I'd like to leave, the person, man or woman that follows in my footsteps, a well-run operating business. We're an ISO certified shop, so we have a lot of process here. But I need to leave them functioning opportunities. And functioning opportunities are in a state of development. Should they choose to go in another direction because that's their expertise, that's fine. I don't expect anybody to ascribe to my vision when I leave. So I anticipate that if they were hired to follow me, that they also have a vision that they were able to articulate that, made for a sound runway to perform. I have to look forward. The agency we support, they're growing. The needs in the community are growing. So the capital component of their requirement is also needed. Well, they get a lot of grant money from, various federal and state governments. They need a, fairly decent contingency of discretionary funding. And the money we provide to all these organizations, again, since our inception, over $500 million US we've returned to these organizations. Somebody's got to be able to continue to provide for that. We've become institutionally ingrained. So my responsibility is to make sure that there is a path to continuity. I can't be responsible for what the guy before me or the guy behind me did, but
hey, I still want to understand a little bit more about where this is going, though, because if people don't buy cars anymore because they just access them through ride sharing, and they might not be able to afford homes in a lot of cases, and we move to an ownership class rather than individual ownership, where are the asset classes coming from?
For that, we have, the current vision in sort of midstream, providing a thing called On the Go, which is a system to provide transportation to seniors, older adults, and or people that have maybe cognitive challenges and have no access to transportation. As we were chatting earlier, in America right now, there are 10,000 individuals turning 65 every day in this country. It's crazy. And there doesn't seem to be a sort of systemic process out there that's providing them access to transportation. And what we know about aging in this country is that, transportation, housing, loneliness, these are the hunger, food insecurity. These are the big issues. And by providing transportation, you solve all of those problems. So we are now active with a dispatch process in 23 states, but actively, like daily, adding transportation solutions. We're doing about 11. I think March we did 11,000 rides. That was up 1,000 the previous month. But there will come a day in the not too distant future where we're doing 11,000 rides a week and eventually 11,000 rides a day as we open it up across the country. Rides are paid for in different ways. One, people can donate to On the Go, or if you want to even look it up and take a look at what the actual system does, it's www.otg on the go, OTG rides, RIDS, otgrides.org. It'll give you some idea. We use combination of rideshare, as in Lyft, Uber Health, or whatever the regional rideshare is, but also we use local NEMT providers. NEMT is non-emergency medical transport vehicle. So the ambulances that don't that don't
have
sirens and that
the lights.
We're not in a rush.
The leisurely ones, got it.
So and so on. So and the need for it is incredible because look, supposing you're at a point where your kids say, "Look, we're taking the keys to the car, we're taking the driver's license." You just, you're a wonderful person, but you're now 84, and that garbage can that you ran over, that trash can you ran over last week could have just as easily been a 7-year-old. So like you can't drive. It's unfortunate, but it gets that way, right? I mean, you had to take your parents' keys away, and at some point, your kids are going to take your keys away. And if your kids don't, then the state's going to do it, right? So, maybe you've got kids that can help, but maybe you're still living, where you grew up, but it was a cold climate, and they moved to somewhere warmer. In this country, maybe you grew up in Chicago, but your parents retired in San Diego or Florida. And you want to stay in touch with them and know what they're doing. So we provide a very high-touch service. Maybe you want to know when your mom or dad gets to the doctor and comes home and so on. So we provide this high-touch where we'll call the senior. And, whether you got to explain it once or 6 times, we deal with them in a dignified way. Maybe you don't want to depend on even your local kids to provide all that transportation. Maybe instead of having food delivered to your house once a week, you want to get out and check your own fresh fruit out, or maybe you want to go and play canasta with your friends, or maybe go to your daughter's home, but you don't want to make her drive all the way out to pick you up and live it on your own. So it allows for independence. It allows for socializing. It allows for dignity in aging. Maybe look. I can tell you that my own mother, the last request she made of me, before she passed on, was Monday of the week she died. I was living in a lovely institution, and she said, "Look, these people are supposed to take me to my hair appointment every Wednesday. I'm not feeling that good, and I am not going to meet my maker with roots. You better these guys take me to my hair appointment on Wednesday." I started to laugh, and then I realized how serious she was, right? I mean, think about your own mom, right? I got to have a little rouge on. I got to have I have to have my hair done. I mean, it's important. All guys, maybe not such a worry for you, but what little hair I have left, I want it to look decently. So she went off. They took her. She went off to her hair appointment on Wednesday, had her hair colored. She looked great. On Friday, she lay down on her bed with her house coat all done up, a little bit of this, colored her cheeks and lipstick on and all the rest of it after breakfast, crossed your arms, went to sleep, and that was the end of that. And you start to think about the significance and importance of allowing for dignified aging and for the sense of freedom and the sense of I'm still in control of my own life in some way, shape, or form. That's why they want to live on their own, why they want to stay in their own homes. And even if they work into move into assisted living, they still want to have the dignity of being able to make their own decisions. And in many ways, that is the value of what we do with On the Go, is allowing for dignified aging in one way. I mean, there are many ways. So for us, that is becoming an ever increasing revenue stream. And long after, people may not be donating vehicles or farm equipment or riding mowers or whatever they're giving. We will have a large, revenue stream operating a nonprofit that provides rides.
I want to just make sure I understand this as a pure bit of infrastructure. So the infrastructure you built for donating cars, you've separately invested in a bit of infrastructure that essentially allows for a charitable ride sharing type scenario so that a ride can be donated. And as an operator of that infrastructure, you, in the same way an Uber or a Lyft might, you take a percentage of the thing that's donated to enable the ride to happen so that you can fund the operation to provide that infrastructure. Is that right?
That's correct. We either get paid for the time on the call because, again, high touch. We'll call you as the senior. We'll call you and say, "Hey, Vince, yeah, get ready." But like the guy will be outside in 10 minutes. Grab your walker and get to the front door. His name is Vincent, and he's driving a red Vauxhall, I'm going to stay with you here until you get in the vehicle, and then I can talk to the vehicle driver, even though it's Uber or Lyft. Our system is API'd, and we can actually communicate with the driver the same way Uber would, and verify that you're in the vehicle. And then what we may do is we may send an email or a text, to their child and say, she's on her way, going to the doctor appointment. We'll let you know when she's home safely. In addition to that, other product we're working on, you're going to hear a lot about, called Third Eye, which is a security product that they can carry with them. You can even watch her. There's a video camera that says, "Oh, you're sitting in front of the doctor now. I can listen to the, to the program." So we're developing those kinds of programs that generate revenue streams for us, again, by providing service to other people in the nonprofit arena. So that's and there are other visions. I mean, we own and operate some of our own auction. Those things will be turned into something different when there's no cars. We may build 4-story independent living facilities on the properties. I mean, who knows? We'll see where the economy takes us. But our job here, my job isn't any different than being the CEO of any other corporation, right? 3M did not start out making, Post-it notes, right? But that's what they do now.
Right.
They started adhesives and abrasives, right? And they into all these other, as we will morph as society changes, as the economy changes, as the requirement for service, which we will grow and change with them.
It's fascinating. I probably have just one question because we really haven't touched on it. How have you ended up here? Like, what is the pathway that got you to being in this place and like not just technically, but also emotionally? How has this been where you've ended up and wanting to basically make it, in some respects, your life's work or the rest of your life?
Well, perhaps the rest of my life is a more apt definition. I will say this beforehand. The best job I've ever had in my life. I had no intention of coming here. I'll tell you the story. The truth is, it is an absolute privilege to do this work. It is a privilege to do this job. We're not serving, one community. We're serving thousands of communities. There's something to be said for that. Mom sending you pictures. I went for an interview for something I didn't really want to do, to be honest. And I wasn't really looking for work at the time, but I was looking for maybe some interim things. I've been very lucky in my life. I've had a couple of public exits, businesses of my own, and I've done a bunch of turnaround work. Anybody that's sort of interested in my LinkedIn profiles out there, and it gets a little complicated. I spent several years living in China, building a large automotive factory for a product for off-roading. I've done a little off-roading in Australia as well, but that's another story for another time and another podcast of a different nature.
Off-road podcast.
Yeah. Pardon me. And so I went for the interview, and by the end of it, I said, okay, look, this really isn't for me, but I recognize the need you have here. And, because I have a large, in those days it was a Rolodex of people. I'm going to go in there and I'm going to help you turn the guy over that's there and run it for, 90 days maybe. And then by then I will have installed another person who has public experience and you'll be fine. But I'd never done any nonprofit work ever. I was, hard, cold, commercial operator, run a couple of public businesses, run some private ones, and in Canada, here in the U.S., and all around China, consolidated a bunch of clients there. And so I said, well, I'll go in for a little period and I'll do this, right? Within 5 days of being here, there were two things that I noticed. The staff are incredible, like really extraordinary human beings. The previous leader did not understand them. Well, he didn't understand that the best thing to do with these people is to get out of their way and let them do what they know how to do, which is, a leadership issue, right? Empowering your people. So that was one. Fell in love with the people. By the way, they're all still here 9 years later. Have no turnover in senior ranks at all. In fact, our entire organization has, probably 1%, maybe even sub 1% turnover. So it's a good place to work. Great culture here. We're fortunate. And second of all, fell in love with the mission. I absolutely categorically fell in love with the mission. I can't even describe to you how important this seemed to become to me. It took hold, and we've grown it hundreds of percentages. It's quadrupled revenue since I've been here, and all these new businesses that we bought and brought in that is expanding the revenue stream. And we have a large homeless problem here in this state, right? So a lot of this money is going to issues that are really critical. We talk about advocacy and we think it's not a big deal, but think of all the seniors that don't have kids. Think of all the seniors that don't have siblings to look after them, and they're in hospitals and in senior homes, and they don't have any advocacy. They don't have anybody to go fight for them to make sure that they're well looked after, that their linens are clean and that they're being fed properly and so on. And so we provide a lot of that. And I found that after 30 odd years in the C-suite, what an extraordinary privilege to take the experience that I garnered over all of these years, some businesses big, some businesses small, and bring that into a nonprofit that touched so many lives in a positive way. And so, when I look at the money that we provide for public broadcast, when I look at the money we provide for cancer cures, for you'll pick it again, just for all the things that the money covers. What a wonderful way to end a career, when it doesn't have to be about, how much money you make anymore. The legacy you leave maybe is more important. What you've done for humanity, one small piece of humanity that you live in. So it's been very fulfilling. Instead of 90 days, again, it's been 90, feels like 90 years. It's only, I'm about to start my 9th year, I think in May, something like that. I don't know, but it feels like a minute. It feels like a minute. I cannot adequately articulate how fulfilling it is to do this work. And
that's fascinating.
These amazing people and the agency that we fund. There are about 600 people over there, and the work they accomplish is extraordinary. So I feel like I am part, I'm just one link in the chain, right? We have guys out there. I go and talk to them. We have guys in auction yards, they're pushing cars in the hot summer sun. And I go out and I remind them, look, you're not pushing an old beater up a hill. Tonight somebody's getting a hot meal because of what you're doing. You need to know that you're a part of a chain that actually impacts people directly today.
Yeah. It's fascinating. Why would you want anything else?
And what you do is the same. You carry the message, right? You're digging into the guts of what makes nonprofits work and not. And look at how many, hopefully, a large number of nonprofits that we don't deal with, across the world. We'll take a look and listen to what it is we've talked about here today. Maybe one of them will pick up the phone and call or get online and sort out how to do this, and we'll provide funding to them as well.
Wonderful. Howard, we'll leave it there today. And I was like fascinated to hear the arc of every part of that story. And I'm actually quite speechless. I'm not usually into the show, but this has been really wonderful for me. And I do hope that we hear some people picking up the phone. But a lot to think about and plenty to digest. But thank you so much for coming on the show today. It was really wonderful.
Oh my God, my pleasure. Thank you for the opportunity, and best of luck to you.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Shape the System. As usual, if you'd like to suggest a guest, someone that you know who's helped change a system for the better, please go to www.shapethesystem.org, click on the top right-hand corner, then click Suggest Guest. Make sure that you click subscribe so that you get the new episode. Shape the System is an independent podcast with support from KPMG High Growth Ventures. Connects founders to the services they need along their journey. Whether you are looking to refine your strategy, mature your finance function, prepare for a capital raise, expand abroad, or simply comply with regulatory requirements, they provide you with the support you need to drive your business forward.